you don't like the rules, don't join the club. What would you say to that?
Well, in what sense? Like, don't join the club of the priesthood or don't join the club of the church?
Well, either, but you know, you're a gay person. They've made it. They've made their position really clear. They've made their doctrine really clear. The statements you just referenced are
Right.
perfect examples of their position,
Right.
and you want to join them.
You know, so you know, I think it's even harder. But before I answer the question, I must say it's even harder because I will say that I think you have very good gay affirming priests doing a tremendous disservice right now, or gay affirming theologians doing a disservice to lesbian and gay, bisexual, trans, and queer people. And that disservice is wait. That disservice is a message of wait. You know, while you have sort of this personal experience of God, that God loves you, that God says go and volunteer in the choir, that God invites you to be Eucharistic minister, you know, again, the church is not saying you as a gay person have anything to offer the community. You know, if the church is watching people, you know, and allowing people to get fired because of who they love, you know, again, these well-intentioned good people are doing a tremendous disservice because they're not letting those people answer that question, right? And that question that you asked is a private question. It has to be, which is sort of both about the catechetical part, but also the pilgrimage and discernment part of my book. You know, and this is what I think my book really offers readers, right? It says, you know, what do you want? You know, ask God this question, propose a question to God, or whoever your God is. You know, it doesn't have to even be a Christian God. It can be whoever, and wherever you are, whether you're atheist or religious or whatever. The idea is to ask this question and to bring it to whomever you go to, and to say, is where I am where I belong? Or can I find sort of a place of community where I can be myself and be fully myself and contribute without having to wait for sort of this moment of full reception. And so it is a little bit like, if you know the rules, you have to ask yourself, what do you want? Do you want to be sort of a safe outsider, a fringe character, you know, who goes to the urban parish in New York City and is sort of a member of the gay and lesbian club, the gay and lesbian ministry activity club, and then go to Nebraska for your cousin's wedding and find out, well, actually, you know what? You're not a member of the church. You can't volunteer here. Or do you want to find some place where you can be fully 100% without question who God made you to be?
Yeah, and I hear you. I hear you. It's just a challenge that I hear often in the argument between faith and you know, the LGBT community. You know, particularly around LGBT marriage. It
Yeah,
says,
because, you know,
we've got rules, we've got our beliefs, and if you
and you have an irony, and the irony is that you have a lot of closeted gay priests doing a lot of the sacramental work.
well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, right?
Yeah.
So there is a disproportionate amount. If we take priesthood as a profession, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lawyer, doctor, you know, whatever, priest.
Right.
There is a statistically higher percentage of gay men in that profession than other professions.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree?
I would agree, but I would also agree that, you know, I would also agree that that is also sort of, you know, for the percentage of those men who are 65 and older, I would say the proportion is larger, more largely, or gravitates to more gay men. I think as you go younger, sort of between the ages of entering seminary to, let's say, 50, I would say that there are more heterosexual men.
Okay. So the younger demographics coming in, there's a higher percentage of heterosexual folks.
In more sort of diocesan or sort of conservative religious orders, because
there's a big old swathe of the gays in the priesthood. I think we can safely.
Yeah, I would say that's safe to say.
And for me, that's a really interesting concept, and I suppose that's what I'm trying to get my head around. And I think the people watching are trying to get their head around is if there is an anti-gay LGBT movement, right? An anti-gay movement, which it institutionally,
structurally,
systemically is anti-gay. Why are all of these gay men a statistically higher proportion finding their way there? And I'm really interested in, you mentioned it a couple of times, I didn't. You said running away. I'm not sure if it's running away.
Right.
You touch on it in the book about emotional, so many gay men who are immaturely emotional or are on some sort of emotional journey finding their way into the priesthood. Right. But there's definitely an element of trying to find something that you currently don't have, and obviously that the easy answer is God. But actually, is there a wider searching for stuff that's missing, that's leading these gay men into the priesthood?
Yeah, I mean, if only we could do a full study, right? But I don't think a religious order or the diocese would let you do this study, and they would not allow you to. So a lot of this is based on my experience and being able to reflect back in my book, and I see most of the gay men that I met did not come from urban areas like New York City. They didn't come from, like directly in the heart of Los Angeles, where you could experience kind of, a more city life, sort of a worldliness. You're coming from sort of these suburban and beyond suburban sort of, areas where there's no experience of sort of a healthy gay lifestyle. And I would say that, again, if you're an impressionable youth who's a young adult who has been involved in the Catholic Church and you are questioning your sexuality, discerning the priesthood is going to be on your radar. You're going to want to think about becoming a priest because, again, even though it's an irony, it's also kind of sad that the church embraces gay men, and not allows them, but elevates them to ordination. Because in a way it says exactly what it does in the Catechism, which is, to have a truly satisfying life in the Roman Catholic Church, the gay man or lesbian must be celibate. And if you are an impressionable youth and young adult Catholic who feels like, what options do I have? You're going to look into the priesthood, because in the priesthood, you can give a homily, you can do the sacraments, you can see people for spiritual direction, you can have a bohemian life, you can go to the opera, you can have your own car if you're a diocesan priest, you can manage your own rectory, and you can do what you want to do with the parish. You can have a live nativity scene. You can do whatever you want to do, and these things seem kind of like, so what does it matter? Well, again, we were talking about the fact that no one has really examined what being gay has been like in the 1990s or the 2000s, and those are not 2020, so a lot of the guys that I entered with and saw leave before I left, those were guys that saw sort of an ability to flourish as a closeted gay priest, and that's how they pursued it.
The church knows, because it knew with you, that it's allowing gay men into the priesthood, right? But it's comfortable in the fact that when you get in, you're celibate, so it's okay.
Yeah.
You're not acting on it, so you're kind of castrated. you're
In a sense.
you're of no threat to the doctrine because you're not active in any way.
Well, and again, I mean, I think, I think what I would say is, the answer to that is tricky because it depends on who the guy is, and certainly, I could say, like, you would have someone like me in the Jesuits who was very sort of, sort of more
Open.
inclusive oriented, and certainly much more assertive about my sexuality, because certainly, I had tried to write sort of a required thesis on human flourishing and homosexuals in the Catholic Church as part of my formation. I was told that if I did that I would not be able to be ordained because I would be sort of embracing fully the treatment of gays and lesbians in the church in a positive way and proactive way, and that would not be very good for my candidacy for ordination. I tried in my regency to work with some gay and lesbian kids, and the president of the high school I worked at told me that, if I go near that, then that's a red flag. So again, there's all of these like mixed messages, like, the gay priests that I met, that I, sort of went to these dinners with, or that I met in the communities, they were all like, come, it'll be great, you could be gay. But the reality is, you could be gay in the sense of supporting one another, but when it came to the hardcore ministry to the community, you were going to either do that quietly or as closeted as possible. Because if you were to say, I'm a gay Jesuit, the things that you try to do would be curtailed by the church. Like, if you are a gay man trying to sort of sell, sort of a spirituality of inclusion, and you suddenly get up there and you say, well, I'm a gay priest. Well, no. First, you must ask your superior in your house, your community. Then you must ask your provincial. So you've already got to go up to like at least 2 people to say, by the way. Plus, you probably had some conversation with your spiritual director, who you're meeting with once a month, to say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this thing that's in my discernment about coming out as a gay priest. And again, first you've got to go to your local superior, then your provincial, and already you've gone to like 3 people to say, God loves me as I am, I'm a gay priest, can I come out? And you know what? The provincial is probably going to say, no, you can't. So then what?
Well, you were censored from day one.
Right.
So there was a perception of we're inclusive, and you can be gay. But actually, the reality is that you can only be these things behind closed doors. You can only be these things internally facing, because you did know other gay priests.
Yeah.
You were talking openly about homosexuality, yours and theirs.
Right.
You were having sex with priests.
Yeah, I had one full affair, and then I, with a guy that I, who was, so I had sort of one instance when I fell in love with a guy very early on, just before I professed vows. Sort of a beautiful kind of romantic story with a person who was a beautiful person. And if I haven't said it already, I have only gratitude for these Jesuit brothers of mine. I'm not doing a Jesuit mission to the laity here in a way to disparage the order. Again, my primary objective is to help LGBT youth and workers, and to offer a discernment to anyone who wants to listen, that whether you are Roman Catholic, Hindu, Jewish, non-practicing atheist, the idea is you can go to whoever you want that you consider God or no God and ask the question, is where I am the place that I belong, or can I make a movement in my life to go somewhere where I am more fully able to be myself? So in other words, do I sit and wait for the voting right to come, or do I say, you know what, I'm going to march and I'm going to go and find the place where I can vote and do it, and so that's why I would say it really is a civil right issue. But,
I felt sorry for you at that part of the book.
Yeah. When I was in the novitiate, and I, sort of, I always sort of remember this, and I was sort of, the summer before I entered, again, I was censored. I wasn't able to publish that thing. I had published something about the Newport sex scandal, but, yeah, I don't know. I think I wanted to make I wasn't accepted when I got that, I wasn't even discerning the Jesuits. So that's how I got that thing published in the Harvard Gay and Lesbian Review before I was discerning the Jesuits. So, my point is, we had this meeting with a novice master. I think he could only be there one night at Fordham Chiswick Hall. And, we meet the novice master. This is kind of like our pre-entrance weekend. And, we're going through it. And then he says, unfortunately, men, I have to leave because my mother passed and I have to go to her funeral. And, so my point is, we didn't share our vocation stories that weekend. And then when I was in the novitiate in 2005, August, at the novitiate, I shared my vocation story, and I was the only one of more than 15 men who publicly identified as gay.
But there was others.
And there were others, and then, again, it took that novice master, just under 10 months to finally say to me, after months of anti-gay and homophobic treatment by two men that I lived with, who are now ordained priests, which is always going to be I guess once a Jesuit, always a Jesuit, and once a proof of ordination, always a proof of ordination.
Tweedledum and Tweedledee.
Yeah, and and what he said, what he basically said was, you caused them to treat you homophobically. You identified as a gay person in an institution that rejects you. Wait a second, I thought we were all Jesuit brothers. I thought we were all supposed to aspire to full inclusion, and that wasn't the case.
Well, they didn't really project the Jesus test.
No,
I call it.
No.
But the point in the book, it was clear you genuinely fell in love. That.
Yeah.
And for me, it boiled down everything that was wrong and everything that is unnatural about those types of religious orders, because you fell in love in real terms, you had a real relationship, celibacy, which we've touched on. The Catholic Church likes to talk about things being unnatural. There is nothing more unnatural in the natural world than celibacy.
Right. Very true.
And it's unusual that the irony of that is missed on them. But I thought it impacted you greatly, because here you were in an institution professing love, and you'd found it. And actually in your story, it felt like you'd been looking for it, and it's a journey you've been on to find that love that really came out of the book, and you found a loving relationship, and it did sound magical, but it had to be hidden. You had to be separated. You were sent to different parts, because you told them about your relationship, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I was, I was honest. I wanted to be transparent, because again, I think what people don't realize too is, the church has been at sort of this anti-gay, anti-gay rhetoric, anti-gay theology thing for a very long time. And whether you're gay or straight, whether you enter at 18 or 22 or 25, when you are in religious life, you're also in a place of self-discovery and in a place of growing up. And, as much as you go through Erickson's stages, which are outdated, Erik Erikson and his stages of formation, and of course they're very outdated, and, others have, but they're the core standard of sort of stage development. But my point is, as you're going through kind of stage development through the lifespan, there are things that you come across that are sort of markers of that period, and sort of falling in love and being in relationship and looking for love. That's part of young adulthood. And the thing that puzzles me about celibacy is that it's sort of a law, as opposed to sort of, it's a practice. It's not even a law, it's just a practice. Like the Pope could say, marry priests, like that. It's not anywhere codified. It's not in the, it's not in the New Testament. Jesus didn't say you must be celibate to follow me. Most of the people that he was with were not celibate. So, the idea is that
he probably wasn't celibate himself.
He probably wasn't celibate himself, but the idea is that you grow up in the church, in the formation, and so you do fall in love, and the falling in love shouldn't scare anyone. If anything, a priest that could say, in my formation, I fell in love, seems to me to be a human priest, not a coward. A priest that can get up and say, I fell in love and I made a mistake, or, I had an affair. I mean, how many marriages have affairs and people struggle and survive and battle through it? Obviously a guy who's celibate and having, 3 affairs a year clearly doesn't have the constitution to be celibate. But if you genuinely fall in love and you try to be very careful about it, I think it's a very good thing.
I thought it was brave of you again, because you were brave at the start, because you said, you know what, this is who I am, take me or leave me.
Yeah.
You had an affair. I don't even call it an affair. You had a relationship. You fell in love. You were, it was a sexual relationship. It was an emotional relationship, and you told them about it.
And I think I also put in the book, I reflect on it and I say, there is part of me that may say and may be able to admit that there was part of me that, did what I did because I had such anger at my novice master for what he had allowed to happen to me.
But you also say in the book that if at that point he and you had come to the conclusion that we actually want to just be happy and live together, shall we leave and have a happy life, and continue our love and our relationship, that you would have. And to me that speaks to the unnatural, in an unnatural space that you were in.
That's the tension, which is
it's love still found a way. Love still found you guys. It's still happening for other priests. It's whatever environment you put around it, as cheesy as it is, love will always
love always wins. And I think that's how, now I identify as Episcopalian and sort of see myself not in the Roman Catholic Church. I was received into the Episcopalian Church, and really I think I did what I encourage others to do in reading my book. Is I entered that discernment and I found a place, a church, no less perfect, more imperfect, that has sort of a married clergy, a clergy of men and women who can date and who can love, and the idea is that, sort of when I was leaving the Jesuits, and, the number one thing was, of course, the firing of gays and lesbians. But, sort of as I turned 34, I also said, dating and love and marriage and children should not be mutually exclusive of who I am as a priest. This idea that I have to be celibate to be a priest because the practical reason of celibacy is that it makes you more available to the people you serve. Well, if I'm a rabbi and I get a call at 4:00 in the morning to go to the hospital because I'm on call that night, I believe the rabbi is going to go to the hospital that night to sort of say prayers for the family. He has a family of his own. I think the Episcopal priest, if he gets called and has to go and do something, he's not going to say, well, I've got my family to tend to. That's not what these ministers do. And those churches don't crumble and fall apart because they have a married clergy.
That's part of my problem, is that actually, when you were a priest, what did you know about family, your own relationships, healthy ones that weren't hidden, healthy sexual relationships, emotional relationships, and women, and the treatment of women within the church. And, the one of the things that jarred me in your book every time I read it is when you refer to the church as she. And I find it, not from you, but I find it this tokenism that the church gives, as in our whole institution is she. Yet every woman a woman can't communicate with the divine. A woman can't be a priest.
That's what you mean.
She can be the parish priest's
secretary.
Or secretary. But there is no role apart from nuns, who are also subservient to priests. For women. And
as you're talking about it, I think 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago when we first met, I was saying, there was a big to-do, the Wall Street Journal, all these people at the AP, Associated Press, they all had this like, oh, wow, the Vatican hires, 5 or 6 women to run the financial institution, the Vatican Bank. Hello, like, why is that a big deal? It's not, that's not the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith. That's not, and it's great. I mean, you have more women working in the Vatican, but I mean, that's what was celebrating, that 5 or 6 women were hired to crunch numbers at the Vatican Bank. I mean, and they're now executives, and that's a big thing. I mean, that doesn't say anything about, women's role in the church. It doesn't say anything of women's sacramental role in the church.
She can do flowers.
She can what?
She can prepare the flowers.
Right, she can prepare the flowers.
There's some big jobs there that women do. But my issue is that it is a sexist institution. Even Mary couldn't have had regular sex. I mean, it had to be a passing.
One time.
That impregnated her, because there is an obsession with sex. But I think that the irony or the hypocrisy is that actually within closed doors there are priests having sex with each other. There are relationships. Why this church has any call to women's bodies, contraception, their right to have an abortion. There is a lot of talking about what others can do, and it's that when I first described the two worlds, it's that hypocrisy between what we say and what we do.
Look in America, the religious hospitals, religious institutions of healthcare, they don't have to provide the universal type of reproductive healthcare approach to women who are members of their insurance. That just came out with the Supreme Court. So if you work for a Catholic high school, and you're a woman, or you work for the diocese and you're a woman, and you want to get an abortion while not using your health care,
And that's why I believe they should lose their not-for-profit.
I
So
agree with you 100%.
you can have these rules, you can have this doctrine,
Yep.
but if that's the case and you're not going to follow, you've got different versions of the law, then you're not entitled to your not-for-profit, and that would soon shake things up, because that's another hypocrisy, isn't it? Live like the poor.
Yeah.
If there is no wealthier religion, is there? The Vatican
Yeah.
is its own country. It's tax havens. It's huge diamond and jeweled rings, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of
Right.
drink in your book. There's a lot of whiskey and scotch,
Right.
and
Right.
it's very far from the Jesus out there washing the feet, and there's a big disconnect between.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. You want sort of an incarnational church that's adapting to the times. You want a church that that doesn't force 2020 to adapt to it, that it adapts to 2020. You don't want you don't want to say what does technology bring to the church. Well, you know you want to say, like, there's a pandemic, allow people to receive the Eucharist in their homes. One of these big kind of things that I think about during the pandemic is the church believes in frequent communion, frequent reception of Holy Communion. Well, during this whole pandemic, while churches have been closed, half of the people have not, more than half have not been receiving communion. And that's supposed to be like one of the big things that separates the people from the Roman Catholic Church from other churches. So if you can sort of allow that practice to stop, and no one raises a red flag like frequent Holy Communion, why can't you allow the practice of celibate priests to end without any question?
Agreed. And Pope Francis, so he's a Jesuit, right? So he came in as our glimmering hope of
Yeah.
the future.
Yeah.
Certainly compared to the guy that he took over from, who was a character, right?
Yeah.
What's your view on Francis?
So, there's a part in my book where I sort of put Pope Francis and Benedict in conversation with each other. And, and I think what happens is, in that dialogue, there's what is the truth about our church. You have Pope Francis, who represents the best intentions of all pastors, of all people who want to do good in the church, who are like-minded with Pope Francis, who want to be egalitarian and democratic. But in the end of the day, the Pope Benedicts, they win because they have the dogma, they have the doctrine, they have the catechism. So whatever you want to do pastorally, whatever you want to do and say, my closeted gay priesthood is a victory for our community, you have to say to yourself, well, no, because at the end of the day, there are thousands of parishes around the world that say gay men and lesbians are intrinsically disordered. And it's the few pastoral places of religious priests in urban centers that try to be as gentle and as inclusive as possible, because of many reasons, one of which would be, if you weren't as inclusive, that would be another 30 to 40 people that would not be coming to that church and not contributing to the financial needs of that church, and that's unfortunate. But Pope Francis, he came in as a tornado. There's that book by Valelli, sort of Tornado Francis, the Francis effect. I really call it the Francis defect, because I think, again, when push comes to shove, the noise that he began with is calm now. The ripples have ended. Who am I to judge regarding celibate gay priest only has not become sort of an inclusive, beloved community of all members. In fact, in the era of Pope Francis, the church in America has fired gays and lesbians from jobs, from volunteer activities, and from employment.
He's having a bit of a similar experience to you, though, isn't he? He came in saying, "This is who I am," and he probably has these moderate beliefs, and he probably is inclusive, and he probably is liberal. But he's come into a wider institution at a senior level, into the top job, and the reality is that the institution is molding and shaping and capping his ability to deploy any of that in the way that he may want to.
However,
how I'm reading it.
The difference is that, you know, I sought to be obedient to my religious order, and I asked them to allow me to come out in support of our brothers and sisters, because I said, this is ridiculous, we're not doing anything. In fact, my last provincial, as I was signing my letter leaving the Jesuits, he said, "You're right, Ben, but there's nothing we can do." You know, Pope Francis, on the other hand, everyone is obedient to him. If he says no more firing gay and lesbian employees and volunteers, no one will fire them.
Agreed. He has a responsibility to step up, which is a fair point. And in terms of, I'm interested as someone who is obviously an expert in this field. Oftentimes, LGBT people get confronted with religions on Bible quotations.
Right.
The Bible is used. In fact, my partner has stopped me from allowing religious door knockers to come in, because I love nothing more than a good debate. But I'm really interested to hear your take on things like Leviticus or Sodom and Gomorrah or whatever. They're all rolled out as the proof that being gay is unacceptable. As someone who was a priest,
well, I was never ordained. I left 2 years before ordination.
Okay. Training to be a priest.
Training to be a
priest. You're still more of an expert than most. But you've done a lot of research, you've done a lot of theology, you've done a lot of reading. What's your take on all of this stuff around the Bible? What do we say to do to confront or challenge that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're someone who's going to Leviticus or Sodom and Gomorrah for the defense of your thesis, I think you really have an inadequate understanding of what those writers and the authors of those passages and the members of those communities had in mind. And I think that not only do you have an inadequate understanding of what those communities and sort of had in mind, but you're also sort of picking out the things that you're using only to defend your thesis. So, does that person eat pork? Does that person eat lobster? Does that person have a beard to a certain length? Is that person, following the rules for reproduction? And on and on and on and on. So my point is, it's really very trite and too obvious and too weak, really, very weak, to just narrow it down to one passage in Leviticus, to one passage in Genesis, and then really these are allegories. These are some laws, and again, the idea is that you want a community that's vibrant, that is fulfilling God through Jesus's sense of the beloved community. And where does Jesus say, gay or a lesbian is sinful? Where does Jesus say, two men that lie together or two men that love each other are sinful? And you can't find it. You can't.
So it didn't come out of Jesus's mouth, but it's the context of these other writings you're saying, and actually,
right. Like if you're a Roman Catholic and you're going to Leviticus, why are you following Jesus? You know, like if Leviticus is your answer for you know dogma and doctrine and the you know the defense of your thesis, why are you not Jewish or you know, or like Orthodox Jewish, you know, like, or Hasidic, you know, like, why are you a practicing Roman Catholic? It doesn't make sense to me.
It's interesting. It's interesting. Thanks for that. So, what would you say to the challenge that some might say, look, you're a gay bloke. You were always a gay bloke. You know, you had experiences outside the priesthood. You know, I can see that you're a trendy guy. You've got some tattoos. You know,
Yeah, I got Saint Ignatius.
love it, love it. It was never going to work out for you in an organization that is intrinsically homophobic, sexist. You know, it doesn't seem to be an institution that shares the values for you. And I'm just, you know, I'm asking, putting words in your mouth, but you know, was that ever going to work out?
Right. Well, you know, I think what's not fair in that is that you know, the person is looking for a black and white answer when discernment is messy and vocation is messy. You know, we're not talking about something that I want. We're talking about something that God wants for me, you know, and God wanted for me to flourish as a priest. And it could have worked out if I had sort of just said, well, you know, I'm not going to focus on the fact that, you know, like so many other closeted gay priests do. Well, I don't care. People are getting fired because they're gay and lesbian. I'm marrying all these, you know, heterosexual couples. You know, you know, do my publishing of my, you know, mysticism papers and academic journals. You know, all this stuff, you know, I can turn a blind eye to it. But I wasn't going to do that.
Yeah, and I think that was always good. The challenge for you was you were pushing uphill. You know, you
Yeah.
were pushing against something that you know was not going to allow you, and made it clear from the beginning was not going to allow you to be you publicly.
Yeah.
And again, that feeds into what we talked about on my issue around
Right.
you know, the hypocrisy and all of that,
Yeah.
the difficulty in that.
Yeah.
You go on to say some harsh things at the, you know, on the way out of the book. I know you've said that this is not to dig out the Catholic Church or your Jesuit brothers, but things like, you know, gay priests who do not come out are missing an opportunity to be Christ-like, and hiding behind vows is cowardly.
Yeah.
Something that Jesus never did.
Yeah.
So they're strong words.
Yeah. They are strong words. And the idea is that, again, you know, why is it okay for you to do that? You know, um, you know, you know, if these weren't gays and lesbians, if these were African Americans or Chinese people, and the Catechism said African Americans are disordered or intrinsically intrinsically disordered, and or Asians have to be celibate to live a flourishing life in God, um, would we even be having this conversation? Or if it said women, the Catechism said women are disordered, you know, like, would we be having this conversation? You know, and yes, if you're a closeted gay person who's a priest, you are being cowardly, because you're the first person that should be out. You're the first person that should be championing your people, your community. You know, all of you're a closeted gay person and you're marrying, you're privileging your status as an ordained man over every other person that's in your community. You're saying just because you're ordained and you're a gay person, you're better than everyone else.
There is a power and dominance theme that
Yes.
runs through.
Yeah. Because it's easy for you as a gay or a gay ordained priest who's closeted to tell those members of the gay and lesbian, ministry at St. Paul's Church in New York City or St. Francis Xavier in New York City, you can have your space here, you can come here, but again, the Detroit Diocese of Detroit, the Archdiocese of Detroit, you just kicked the gay and lesbian ministry out of it, just said, no, these things cannot exist. The gay and lesbian ministry of the Archdiocese of Detroit, so, it's just not right. At the end of the day, where is your conscience?
And how did you marry the sexism of the church with your values of inclusion?
Well, again, I think that's why, as I reflect back on it, the church doesn't adapt to its times. And I saw myself evolving and discerning out of the church as the church left me. You know what I mean? The church was never adapting itself to what I believed in, which is full inclusion of women, full inclusion of lesbian and gay and trans and bisexual people. The church saying that gays and, the church apologizing for its treatment of gays and lesbians and saying, much like reparations, the church, I'm so sorry that, I may have caused such trouble for you and your mother, or such trouble for you and your family, or that you lost your family because, I considered you disordered or unclean or not true to what nature conceived, that this is a choice, or it's not a choice, but to be this, you must be celibate. Like, the idea is that the church left me, and that's why I think it's unfair that a lot of these priests who talk about, or religious who talk about the place of women, or I want women deacons, I'm not diminishing their work, but I'm saying, why not find a place that has all that?
Yeah, which is what you did, right? So,
right, that's what I did, and the sky didn't fall, and Jesus didn't threaten my life, and my family still loved me, and in fact my relationship with my mother was never better before she died, because in the end of the day, I'm an ex-Jesuit. I wanted to give the eulogy for my mother at her funeral, and the local priest wouldn't let me do it because I'm a gay man and I talk like this about the place of gays and lesbians in the church.
It was so cruel. It was so un-Christ-like.
Yeah.
When you couldn't do the eulogy at your own mother's funeral.
Yeah, my family's like, well, you got to hand it out and distribute it. So the priest wouldn't review my remarks. The bishop wouldn't review my remarks. No one would review my remarks to see what I was saying or not saying. All I know is that as a gay man who was a former Jesuit, who has an expertise in theology, that I was not allowed to eulogize my own mother. Now, you tell me, is that the Francis effect?
Right, or is that the Jesus effect?
Right, exactly.
Very, very, very cruel. So, where's the future for the Catholic Church then? What is it?
Yeah, I am not a member of the Roman Catholic Church anymore, and I don't have to answer that question because that is not in my purview. I think what I want to do is I want to share my story and share this idea of discernment for people who you mentioned, the woman who wants a better role in the church, the person who wants women deacons, the gay man who wants, a church that fully loves him, the family who wants to remain Catholic because they have gay kids. Take what take your lived experience of God and your religion and your faith to discernment and ask the question, is this where you want me to be?
You've raised some really interesting questions about that distance between what God wants for you and what an organized religion wants for you. I think you've raised some really good stuff about choice.
Yeah.
And you acting on that choice, I'm happy for you,
Thank
because
you. Thank
ultimately
you.
reading the book, you read it and you're like, you just want this guy to be happy and to
Right.
find whatever it is that you're looking
Right.
for. And
Right.
so are you happy?
Yeah, I am happy. And uh, you know, being part of the human race means adversity. It means ups and downs. And it certainly means that, as much as there were ups and downs in religious life, there are ups and downs in my current life. And I am happy. I am much more myself. And like I said, I think what I want people to know is that I don't have to entertain these tension-driven questions that frustrate me as a believer. I can live a much more harmonious, balanced life by being who God wants me to be in the place God wants me to be.
I love that. And you mentioned a few times LGBT youth. What would you say to any LGBT person out there who's experiencing hardship because of religious, or not just a young person, but anybody who's experiencing hardship because of religious beliefs, saying that they're making a choice, a sinful choice, and their life
Yeah.
is terrible. What's your message to those people who are struggling with the conflict brought about by religion?
So, talk to, don't keep it inside. Don't bury it. Don't run from it. But try to find somebody that you can, I think with modern technology and all this stuff, you can find somebody, you know,
Yeah,
you have to ask yourself, who do you want to be in relationship with? The people who uh, don't fully accept you, or the people who do? And um, if you're living at home with a family that doesn't fully accept you, and you don't have the ability to leave that place or find a way out, um, you, much like those youth, you have to find someone to talk to, and you have to find a place where you can go, where you're not alone. And the world is not so small anymore. So don't withdraw. um, Look for balance, look for hope, look for those people that give you life, and realize, I think for both, realize that it's not your fault, right? You didn't cause this. You didn't do anything wrong. God loves you. God created you for who you are. you know don't beat yourself up, don't feel guilty, don't feel shame. There's nothing that you did. The Pope could change the catechism like that if he wanted to, but the church is not adapting to the 21st century, and the 21st century is overlooking the church.
love it. Ben, thank you so much for your time. It was
Well,
a
thank you, Ed. Yeah.
talking to you. The details
Okay.
of the book are in the description below. I would recommend. We've only scratched the surface on some of the stuff that's in there. So check it out in the description below, and we'd love to hear your comments. And also, if people want to, you've mentioned in the future sometime to even do a live Q&A if people want to talk to you in more detail about some of the topics. So
Yeah, I'm available. Just write to Ed, and I'm on Instagram, Ben Brenkert 1980. You can message me there. I'm happy to be available to anyone. And again, this is about the growth mindset. We have to be sort of aware of ourselves as changing people.
love it, and I'll put all your socials in
Thanks
the
a lot.
in
Thanks,
the
Ed.
well. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right.